Can you hear me? Oh,
I
great. I'm
can. I
great.
can. Excellent.
Thank
Yeah.
you for being here,
I have
Jayne.
the
Thank you for
headphones
being
in and everything. I'm happy to be with you today.
awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And again, guys, I know that Michelle's name is showing, but my name is Desiree H. Young, and I'm excited to be your hostess with the mostest. And this is what's interesting. We have a couple things in common. I'm not yet an author. However, when Jayne is not developing this incredible series called Black Girls Must Die Exhausted. There's several books in the series. What's interesting is that she is a serial entrepreneur, a Harvard trained attorney, and engineer. Being a mechanical
Yeah.
engineer in my former life, I was like, oh my goodness, engineers can write. This is, and
Yes,
write
we can.
actually something that's fiction.
Yes. And you know what
Talk to us about.
oh, well, the surprising thing for me with engineering is that I originally thought in engineering I wouldn't have to write. And, the irony is that, now that is a very big focus in my life. So, things do change. And I think law school helped a little bit. I
Can you
think
still hear me, Jayne? I think I had a little
now I
hiccup.
can hear you. Yeah, now I can hear you again.
Awesome.
Great.
Awesome. Great. Great. So we're here on a historical day, right? I mean,
We
we've got
are.
the first female vice president, we've got a woman of color. And the idea of talking about this whole idea of diversity in publishing, I just feel like it's incredibly timely. And I want to say something that I know you have certainly written on your website. It's also in all of your books. You talk about you're not just being a writer, but also being a publisher. And I read a quote, and you said that Quality Black Books, the name of your company, was established to provide a necessary expansion of the traditional publishing industry. You said there's a need for more diverse voices in literature with the freedom and leeway to write undiluted perspectives for more diverse audiences. I love this concept of undiluted perspectives. Tell us what that means.
So when I had the idea for Black Girls Must Die Exhausted, and I should also give a little background. I come from the music industry, so I worked as a lawyer in the music industry, and I saw something. I saw the transition of the music industry where it was very centralized when I was there, and over time became sort of a space where independence really led the diversification of what we heard as pop music and a lot of things. So I had this in the back of my mind, like, that audiences can expand, and there is a under exploitation of audiences in, traditional industries. It just kind of happens. And a lot of the innovation and market expansion happens in the independent space. And what I realized when it came to writing and entering into the publishing industry is that there was a lane that was wide open. And for me, it seemed like, with I'm a big fan of, what we call chick lit, which, on today's historic day, I would like to call it women's contemporary fiction. But
Let's do it. Yeah,
because we have a
let's
vice
remake it.
president as women. But I'm a big fan of women's stories, of women coming into their own, of women finding their way, and the kind of quirky, funny journeys that ensue. But what I never really got to see, and I haven't seen a lot, is the Black female protagonist in a sort of culturally integrated space, which is the space that we don't all live in an all Black world, or and we don't live in an all white world. We kind of switch back and forth, and there's these layers of our human experience that race imposes, and it's not our whole story. So I see, the books where I saw a lot of books, where there's a Black sort of supporting character, and she's just got crinkly hair and a spicy attitude, but you don't really know who she is as a person. And then when you have sort of Black leading ladies, it's kind of in a Black world where you don't get to see the intersectional layers of race. So what I wanted to write was this, culturally integrated fiction that laid upon the experience of a Black leading lady, the experience of race to her human experience, so that you could see it and that you could feel it and that you could understand it and that we could examine it, but it wasn't the whole story. So
Oh,
I saw this lane, and the thing I knew from the music industry is that, traditional industries, they're big companies. They're responsible for a profit and loss, statement. They've got to be profitable, and there's a lot of jobs depending on that. So they're not going to take a lot of risks as it pertains to market expansion. That's kind of for the space of independence. And if you see a lane, which I did, I believe that the market, I believe Black women would want to see recognizable versions of themselves in fiction, as I did. And I believed, or more recognizable versions. And I believe that non-Black women, and men as well, of all ethnicities, would want to see this and be able to understand. And this was before George Floyd. I just believed it because it's a human story, and race is a human experience. So I didn't expect necessarily that traditional publishing would be ready or would understand or see the opportunity. And I was fully prepared to prove it and show it with this book. So that's where that concept that you just read came from for Quality Black books.
got it. And I love, Jane, that you mentioned about this market for, as you called it, recognizable versions of Black women, because there is this weird assumption that if you're a Black author, then your only market are other Black people, right?
Yeah,
Or if
that's
it's
not,
women,
yeah.
it's got to be women. Talk a little bit more about this, understanding fully who's going to potentially be interested in our work.
Yeah. Well, when I wrote my protagonist, Tabitha Walker, she's a Black female. She has a white grandmother, which is sort of incidental to her identity. She's a Black woman. She has Black friends. She has white friends. She has white coworkers. She has Black coworkers. Well, she doesn't have that many Black coworkers, actually. She's a television reporter, which is, another failure of diversity in certain segments. But
It's real
in
life.
this, it's real life. And I wanted to show real life, but unpack the layers of it. And for this, most of us don't, we live like this. We're in yoga classes, we're going to Starbucks, we're sitting in boardrooms and at tables. And the experience of this really needs to be unpacked and shown, because we code switch. We have one way that we are with our girlfriends and family, and one cultural experience, and then we're into another cultural experience, when we're in the workplace, and maybe when we're with, non-Black friends, and all of it intersects, and we're striving to understand and relate and connect on a human level. And I think other people who don't have our same, native cultural experience are also trying to connect. As human beings, we're all trying to connect. We're all trying to understand. And so giving as many opportunities as possible to provide that, but also to allow underrepresented people to see themselves in fiction. That is important. It's a validation, it's a celebration, and it's something that can be shared. And I have seen in the course of this book, and I think it's just a proof of concept, that I think there's a lot more opportunity, but it's been readers from all segments of populations around the world, different ethnicities, races, genders, that can relate, because it's a human story. And the rest of it, race and culture, there are layers in that story. But that's not the story. It's a human story.
That's incredible. I love how much you talked about the whole validation, celebration, and recognizing it should be shared. Because again, this is so much of a mindset, especially for authors, aspiring authors, so they don't limit themselves, right? Limit themselves to who their audience can be.
Right. And I think the thing for, authors, if I could say anything as a takeaway for authors, aspiring authors, or people who are kind of sitting on the sidelines with a great idea, you know, you are the best person to know who your audience is, and an underserved, and to identify an underserved segment, because that's likely where your idea came from. You likely had this idea. People don't just come up with ideas like, oh, I've seen this everywhere, so that's what I'm going to do. They
Right.
get a good idea because they're like, this should be in the world. And
Yeah.
why do you think it should be in the world? Because there's a lane that's open. There's something missing. You feel it. And there's, billions of people in the world. So the odds are that a good segment of the population also is looking for that, especially if it's not prevalent. So you, as an author, with that creative idea, that I call it a creative mandate, an idea is a creative mandate or assignment.
Yeah.
It's up to you to push that idea into the world and allow it to attract its audience, and to prove and show that audience. Each step that we take in this direction proves and shows the case for diversity. So there's much more to it than just expressing an idea. It's moving in a direction, and it's expanding the market.
Oh, terrific. I'm going to get into this a bit later. I was about to mention this whole idea about the creative mandate. I was like, that should be on a t-shirt. And I know that you have t-shirts and
I
some new.
do.
Yes, you do. But we'll get into that later. We'll get into that later. So I was thinking about this 15,000 copies. That's how many books that you have sold without the traditional agency publisher. I'm going to code switch. Girl, how? How? Talk to us. Help us to know what is this? How did this occur
Yeah.
in about 5 minutes or so, right? But
I
tell us.
know. Well, I'll try to drill it down. First, it started with an intention, and I honestly, when I started this book, I wrote an intention for myself. I will be, writing a transformational fiction that's going to touch hearts and change lives. I would write this. I wish I had it with me. I'd read you what I wrote, but what I put into this, from starting from an intention before I even wrote a word, it was intended into it. And I intended more than 15,000. I intended millions of copies is what I started. So we're just getting started.
Got it.
But we're just getting started. But I did start with an intention. And then I started putting together the toolkit that I felt I needed as a writer to really embody this story well. And I took some courses. I wanted to make sure I was writing and capturing emotion correctly. I wanted people to be able to feel in this book and be able to trust the emotions that they were feeling. I wanted to take them on a journey where when they close the last page, they could be different, and in a good way, and to have it be transformative, where they could. I wanted women. I wanted Black women. I wanted women to close that book and say, "Yes, I'm bad. I got." And that was the journey I wanted to go on with this. So I hired a story editor. I really put the work into making this as excellent as I could as a story to start with. And then I just set about, again, putting the pieces together. So I knew that I needed reviews. So I spent the first 6 months, I put a lot of investment into the book, not an unachievable amount, but, there was an investment where I'm like, I need to recoup this money. But
Got
for
it.
the
Yeah.
first 6 months, I just focused on reviews. I just focused on reviews. I focused on one thing at a time. I said everything in its time. And I didn't tie myself to the, kind of traditional publishing um, framework, because I wasn't in the traditional publishing framework. So I had to make my own framework. And that meant, okay, it's not going to be all your sales are consolidated in the first 6 months post-publication. It means that in the first 6 months post-publication, you're just focusing on reviews. And that's it. And so once I got to that point, the sales of the book were allowed me to afford to pay a publicist to help just amplify. You have to get something to amplify. So when I had a good number of reviews and the reviews were good, so that was for the first proof of concept, then the publicist helped me amplify. And you can also do that yourself. It's just, you can do it with ads, you can do it with relationships, you can send emails. It is not to amplify. So that's, you have a good number of reviews, that you got a good proof of concept that people like, and so I was really pleased to know that people got it, because I was nervous when I put this was my first novel, Black Girls Must Die Exhausted. I thought that was me being an artist. I was like, this is what I have to say, but I was worried to death. I was like, are people going to get it? This is just what I want. Reviews were good. And so my publicist helped me to amplify and to kind of broadcast that and to increase exposure. And so now the other thing is, I think in traditional publishing, people think of books as sort of these time limited, you have the front list and they're on the shelf, and then 6 months later they're off the shelf, and that was kind of the run, and whatever sales you were able to generate from pre-sale to pre-order to this 6-month window, that's it. Well, that's not the case with independent publishing, and that's not the case with this book. So I stuck with it. I stayed with it every day, every little bit. I put a little bit into it. I had a full-time job, so I put into it every bit of time that I could. Even if it was, this day I'm going to write a Instagram post and just tell people, a little bit of background about me or the book, and just kept at it, kept with it. I respond to every comment. People know me on Instagram. I participate in the Bookstagram community authentically because I like to read. I try to identify books and independent authors that are similar to mine, so that people want to know what to read next. I try to provide that. So I've also tried to just be of service and create a relationship that was sustainable and that people could trust. They could leave my book and still connect with me, and we could still keep the communication going, and more books would be following. And word of mouth has been an incredible tool, and it's been readers that have been so excited and energized because it was something that had been missing in the market, and people are excited either one to see themselves in the market or see themselves reflected in fiction, or to be able to see this protagonist that they've never gotten to get to know, and and learn something out of culture, read out of culture in a way that's so intimate and authentic that they tell people about it. So that's been amazing. And then the one other thing that I did that I think has been instrumental in the wake of just before George Floyd, it was coronavirus that did this. Okay, so I had a few speaking engagements that got canceled, and I put a post and I said, look, everything's virtual now. If you have a book club and you're reading my book, I will come to your book club. I will just send me a note and let me know the details, and I'll be there. And so I think it's been over 50 book clubs, after this, including before and after this time and during coronavirus. So I've been busy. I've been traveling all over the world from my sofa that you see back there, visiting with book clubs and groups, and just making myself available.
That is awesome. And I mean, and so creative and ingenious, right? I mean, it sounds like you have certainly taken the opportunities to seize the moments, but there's also a sense of this longevity and being in it for the long game. I wondered for authors, those that are aspiring, those that maybe already have books out, what is it that you would say? You talked about writing the intention. What other aspects of the mind game when it comes to not going the traditional route?
Yeah. Well, I think that it's important to realize that, diversity in publishing right now is sort of a moral mandate, right? It's a moral initiative, a moral imperative. And that's kind of the first and early step along the way for it to be a economic and profit imperative, that the realization comes that, wow, this is actually a market expansion opportunity, and this is a business opportunity. So it starts with the moral imperative, but it soon, people come to realize, oh my gosh, this is the way that we expand our market. This is the way, and this is what happened in the music industry. So it's inevitable for publishing. While we're in this early stages, as an author, especially if you're an African-American author, if you're writing something, or even if you're not African-American, but you're a traditionally underrepresented author, it may be that publishing independently is your way to make your point, to prove your market, and the opportunities will open up for you. That has been the case for me, I will say that. So don't get discouraged thinking that there's only one avenue, and that's traditional publishing. That's been disproven many times over by 50 Shades of Grey, by, My Name is Alice, by, a number of books. And you can Google, books that have gone from independent publishing to traditionally published platforms and been scaled up, or, have been the first book that, led into a traditional publishing deal. So if you have an idea and the creative mandate, realize that, you, with some information, I had to inform myself in how to, write a novel, and to do it well, I had to take classes, I had to get information. You afford yourself of the information that you need, and then you go full steam ahead with your idea and don't get stalled. The only person that can tell you no is you. And that's a reality, that you can have your book published, you can market your book, and everything you don't know how to do, you can learn how to do it one day at a time, which is what I've done. It's just, I don't, it's kind of feeling my way forward, and, does this work, or, does this, and some things work and some things don't, but it's about just doing it with the intention that, I set the intention, I want to sell 1,000,000+ copies of this book. So I had to first write a book that I thought could sell 1,000,000+ copies. And I had to get the validation from readers that, yes, this could sell 1,000,000+ copies. Yes, we love this. And then, so now it's just a matter of every day continuing to do what's in front of me, that I can identify, that I can learn about, that I can, try, that to get to that place, just every day taking those steps, and not stopping. There's always something new to do or try. So, the discouragement is something self-imposed. There's traditional publishing, they're learning too. And you can be, you might be the expert, and they might have to catch up. So don't stop running
Yeah,
just
I
because
love
people have
that.
to catch up with you,
I
you
love
know?
that. So poignant, so poignant. You mentioned how coronavirus, in an interesting kind of way, has given you a little bit more of a good push. And of course, we know George Floyd. There have been many markets, many individuals that are looking for our work. But there's also the latest social movement, the hashtag publishing paid me, and they have uncovered even more biases of how
Mhm.
Black writers, white writers are paid by those major publishing houses. In your experience, we're curious, what have you seen or experienced up to this point, not counting, of course, this very unique time and climate? What have you experienced, though, in dispute to that? I mean, have you seen that there is still this seem of all of the disputes, or do you find that there's even more support?
Well, I think that you have to really understand this. And I think me, coming from the music industry, again, I have a particular perspective, the business perspective of it. And the advances that are paid are based on an assumption or perception of royalties that will be payable, which is directly correlated to anticipated sales. And that is directly correlated to anticipated market. So in traditional publishing, they've had, sort of the same market that is relatively homogenous, the assumed market that they've been, selling to for a long time. And the reality is that the markets change. The book buying publics change, the tastes have changed. Even amongst the market they've been selling to, their tastes have changed, but they haven't caught up yet. So when you get a Black author, when you get a work that's, coming from a diverse perspective, when you get something that's new or novel, it's going to be underestimated. And that is a bias. And it's a sort of business bias, and it's a personal bias. Because if you have sort of a homogenous life and you're insulated and you're in an insulated industry, it happens that way. And so I'm just talking about this from a practical perspective for the way for an author to look at this and not get discouraged. Okay. So
Right.
so because of that, um, sometimes you put more power in your hands by proving the market and showing the market. The more you can do that, the more powerful you are. And I think, with a lot of industries, diversity has come through the independent channels. If you think about Motown, for example, and Berry Gordy, I'm from Detroit, so I know that story well. He overcame discrimination through excellence in the independent space and made a way for his label and his artists in that way. And so, as diverse artists and writers, you never can discount the independent space. And you see in the music industry how it's happened. The same opportunity is there in publishing. So yes, I do think that there's absolute disparity in payments, and in part that's a misperception and a delay in understanding where people are, and a bias that hasn't been challenged sufficiently, that needs to change. And the industry, I think, is working to change itself, but without clear knowledge or direction about how to do it. And I think we as authors have more power than we realize in helping to accelerate those changes, and being more of an active participant in how our work comes to market. So, and I think things need to change about the publishing industry as well. I think that, instead of looking at independent work as, okay, well, we can't, republish this, or we don't know how, to look at it like, you know what, this is a proof of concept. There's a huge market opportunity here. We're going to go ahead and exploit this and get it more exposure, and hence more sales. More exposure would lead to more sales if you look at things as proof of concept. And I think so there's a lot of things that need to change, but there's a lot more power in the hands of authors these days than we realize.
So you talk about this power, and I'd love to hear, and I know our watchers and listeners would as well, about some of the other things you're doing. In addition to authoring this incredible series, what other things are you doing to change this industry?
Yes, so in addition with coronavirus, I mean, I've always kind of done Instagram lives when I spend a lot of time on Instagram, and I like to connect with readers and fans and writers. There's a lot of writers that follow me as well. And I decided, okay, well, if we're going to be in quarantine and on lockdown, we're going to, I think a great way to let the time pass productively is to engage in your dream and whatever your project is, whatever your creative mandate is, your idea, to engage with that. So what I try to do every Sunday, I do an Instagram live that tried to remove obstacles for people for their creative expression, for their writing projects. So I try to pick a topic. I try to encourage people, because I've been there. I almost talked myself out of writing Black Girls Must Die Exhausted. And if I had done that, I almost did. And if I had done that, I was like, I'm too busy. If I had done that, it wouldn't have been available in the wake of George Floyd, when people were looking for an experiential reference for the Black experience. And, that when people have told me, well, I got tired of reading nonfiction. And so, I wanted to read something that could be more experiential. And my book was available to them for that. With my Instagram lives, I tried to do that consistently. And then I started working with a partner, and we started offering master classes. So we call it Jumpstart Your Book. We just are trying to help people kind of understand the entire trajectory from start to finish of how you write a book, how you craft your story, how you bring your book to market, how you market it. So all the steps, from start to finish, you leave and okay, this is exactly what I need to do, which is kind of that feeling that I always wanted to have. It's like, well, whether I do it or not, I know exactly what I need to do, and I think that starts to lower the resistance to moving forward, because I know there's information gaps. And I know people are like, well, I'm just trying to figure out how to write this novel, or write this book. Now you're telling me I have to publish it and market it and all this stuff. So it can be intimidating. So my goal has been to reduce the intimidation factor and just encourage people to bring and give power to their ideas and their creativity, to teach them to honor those ideas. Because I think in our society, we're taught that, especially as professionals, we're taught that creativity is sort of this kind of flip, in non-substantive
Absolutely.
pursuit.
And only a
and that,
select few get it, right? If
and
they're
right, and
gifted,
only
you
right.
get it or you don't.
You either get it or you don't, and you either, and if you pursue it, then you're an artist, and that's flighty, and nobody thinks of that as a business. You're a business person or you're an entrepreneur. Nobody would say that, but that's what it is. It's entrepreneurship, and it's creative entrepreneurship. And people do need to be taught to validate their ideas, to give weight to them and substance to them, that it's not just a dream, that it's a creative mandate, that that's an assignment that you can choose to accept or not. And if you don't accept it, then you won't be able to reap the benefits down the road. If I hadn't accepted my creative mandate for Black Girls Must Die Exhausted, it wouldn't have been in the marketplace post George Floyd. And now that I've experienced the conversations and interactions with people, book clubs, discussion groups all around the world, that would have been a tragedy. I think about that all the time. And so I just try to stress that it's not something to just take lightly or let go, into the wind. Grasp onto it and just try to take what steps you can to make it come true.
No doubt. And it also would have like prohibited other people from being able to learn from you. I mean,
Yeah.
what better person than someone who's been there, not just someone who's studied book
Right.
writing, but who's walked it out, right?
In the
And it's also been
trenches.
through this. Yes, yes. We've got a question here, Jayne, and I know this is such incredible conversation. I don't want, but I want to make sure to get this question in before we wrap up. This
Absolutely.
came in from Julie, and Julie mentioned, I belong to many book groups on Facebook. Most of them are predominantly white female authors and white female readers. She
Mhm.
asked the question, and I don't know if we can answer this swiftly, but she asked the question, how can we change this?
Um, well, I think that it is just a matter, oftentimes, of exposure. So I have had several predominantly white female book clubs reach out to me, and I think they found me through Instagram or through. They look on one of the book sales platforms and they Google Black writers, and sometimes my book will come up, and they see there's a lot of positive reviews, and they reach out, will you come talk to us. So I know that exposure is definitely element of that. And I think in terms of um, the homogenous nature of the book clubs and the people in the book clubs, I think that is something that hopefully through social media and through networking, we I don't want to put the onus on uh, you know people who've been excluded traditionally to try to make their way into another group. But I think that we just have to keep doing what we're doing, and
Yeah.
I think we need to have more exposure and more amplification. And I think the traditional publishing industry can help with that. I think we can continue to leverage social media and find ways to do that, and just stay consistent with it and not give up. The way it looks now is not the way that it's always going to look. So I think you have to start with identifying the problem, and then just and find a solution and keep going with it, keep at it. And we need more amplification. We need white readers and white female readers to also say, I want more diverse work. And I've seen these movements on Instagram. I've seen a lot of non-Black readers, white women, not Asian, Hispanic, of all ethnicities. I guess I've sat in a very lovely seat, to be able to see this happening. I've seen the seed of it happen with people who are, demanding more diverse reading. So we just have to keep at it. I think we're at the very early stages. Don't get discouraged. Keep reaching out. If one person isn't receptive, try 2, try 10. And just don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on your idea. Don't give up on this movement, because it's happening. It is happening.
It is happening. It is. This is the piece I want to make sure all of our listeners, watchers get, Jayne. How can they learn more about you? And that same person, Julie, said she loved the first 2 books.
Oh, thank
She
you.
asked the question, how's the third one coming? Is there a third one coming? And what else and where can we find you and keep in touch?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I get that message from readers all the time. Where's the third book? Or I'm patiently waiting. I'm like, okay, but that's the third message. But
Of course, it's kind
I
of like you get married and they're like, where are the children? You're like, wait, wait.
I know it's on the way. It's
It's
baking.
on
Yeah.
the way.
So I'm working on the third book. It is well underway. And I was hoping to get it out this year, probably be very early next year. And I will start teasing information about that. I will have hopefully some other positive announcements about new projects on the way. I am at Jayne Allen, JayneAllen Writes, Jayne Allen Writes, and that's Instagram. So at Jayne Allen Writes, and Jayne Allen Said on Twitter. But I'm mostly active on Instagram. So if you're on Instagram, please follow me there. And otherwise, you can sign up for my mailing list at JayneAllen.com. And that's JAYNE, JayneAllen.com. So yeah, please stay connected because I do plan to start publishing, just more thought pieces, and this topic of diversity has been really, really what strongly is one that's close to my heart and experience, and I just want to talk more about that, and also help people with ways to continue to foster this development, because it is happening, and I think together, all of us, we can accelerate
That's incredible.
the progress.
Diane J said she just snagged your first book in the series and she's going to check it out this weekend. So,
Thank
so you're right.
you. Enjoy. Yes.
There was one last question here, Jayne. This one came from April, and she asked the question, what's your favorite genre to read? And what was the most difficult book to write?
Okay. Well, my favorite genre is definitely contemporary women's literature. We call it chick lit,
Yes.
but I like upmarket fiction, contemporary. But I like stories about women and relationships and relating, and just kind of trying to make the best of everyday experiences, or kind of off parallel to everyday experiences. And I like transportative transportative fiction. Like I like Kevin Kwan's writing, and
Okay.
I like to bring people into new experiences, and give them something that they can trust, but travel from their living room or wherever they're reading, from the comfort of their reading experience. That's really fun to me. The hardest book for me to write was definitely Black Girls Must Die Exhausted, because I'd never written fiction before, and I really wanted it to be excellent. And I really wanted people to be able to feel the experience of the characters and connect to the characters. And I challenged myself. I challenged myself to integrate the experience of race, but not make the story about race. And I think that was, something really, really unique. And one of the scenes in Black Girls Must Die Exhausted, the main character, who's again a Black woman, has a conversation with her grandmother, who's white, and they ask each other, what does it feel like to be to live within the race that you've been assigned, that life experience? And it was such a you know deep and moving conversation that we don't see in real life very often. And I just felt like it was an incredible honor to be able to write that. It was difficult. It was the challenge that I most look forward to in writing Black Girls. And so, that was one of the best writing and most challenging writing experiences I've had so far.
Oh man, no question. It's as if what you're doing, as you mentioned, is so new. We've not heard it, we've not seen it, but we've been waiting for it. And I am grateful to have had this conversation. You are serving and representing us well, Jayne. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. I got some big examples to live up to, especially today. I'm like, we've got to show up and show out.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Well, this is awesome. Guys, I want to make sure you all connect with where she is. And I like that she's not just doing the incredible authorship, but she's also offering the ability to learn more about this craft, to learn more about not just writing the book, but the full process from authoring to marketing as well. So thank you again, Jayne. Make sure to
Thanks for
connect with
having
her.
me.
And guys, this is it. Doggone. This has been so much fun. I want to just